Every one of us has that capability in our brain to build genius. It is not until you really get good at letting go that you can advance into your bullish and brighter future. We are awesomely powerful beings. Most of us have blocked our intimacy with our true power.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 for my top 10, top 10, 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Robin Sharma, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Clean out your ecosystem.
Clean out your ecosystem. We all have an ecosystem. That could be your friends. It could be the influencers you follow on social media. It could be the places you work. It could be your home. It could be your city. It could be your street. We all have an environment, and your environment profoundly shapes your energy, your creativity, your performance, and the way you live your life. So you want to upgrade to your next level of world class. You want to remove any form of toxicity or low energy. Just the benchmark or the meter is basically what things bring you joy versus what things decrease your positivity. And move towards the activities and the people and the places and the spaces that fill you with joy this year if you really want to have revolutions of increased performance, productivity, and happiness.
Rule number 2, get rid of distraction.
People's phones are costing them their fortune. So how do I do it? One of the rituals in the book is the tight bubble of total focus. It's based on Edison's Menlo Park. There's a great documentary on what he did, but essentially him and his band of co-geniuses would leave the world, go up to this hill to Menlo Park, where they could get into flow state. To give credit where it's due, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, University of Chicago, came up with that term, flow, when we're at our absolute best doing magical things in our performance. But that only comes when we get away from the world. So you can play with your phone, or you can be monomaniacally focused on being a history maker and legendary. You don't get to do both. And so building periods of time in that tight bubble of total focus where you leave your phone in another room, where you train your team, or if you don't have a team, you just don't have any distractions. And you ask yourself, what is the one thing I could do that would allow me to go out in the world and bring my magic to the world? The human brain has a phenomenon called transient hypofrontality. The neocortex, as you know, it's the seat of thinking. It's our monkey mind. It's all the chattering. It's the stuff that says, Tom, you can't do it. Robin, you can't do it. What would they think? What if I fail? What if I get laughed at? That's all the neocortex. It's the crown jewel of brain development. Not our primitive brain, crown jewel. But there's no genius in there. Now, here's what I mean. When we get away from distraction and we find our Menlo Park, or we go work in a quiet place and we get lost, the neocortex actually shuts down, and that's why it's called transient hypofrontality. For a short period of time, our thinking shuts down. The whole model is in the book. And we actually go from brain waves at beta, down to alpha, down to theta, and maybe even delta. And we stop thinking and we go into flow. In other words, the advanced minds of the world, the great geniuses, Galileo, Da Vinci, Steve Jobs, they weren't in the neocortex. They got away from the world for bursts of time, which allowed them to access the human capability we all have to get into flow state and access insights that they went out in the world and then executed on with a world-class team, which totally changed the game.
Rule number 3, practice.
The pathway to world class is hard. I think suffering's got a bad rap. I think difficulty, you look at any great athlete, for example, they understand that challenge, difficulty, grit, persistence, wiring in new habits, morning rituals, evening routines are the price of admission for world class.
Right.
And so let's go to the research again. University College London says it takes 66 days of practice to wire in a new habit. In other words, the gift of genius is not genius. The gift of genius is actually neuroplasticity. In other words, we have a brain that can grow. It's sort of plastic. It's malleable. The good news is that that's not just for Kanye and Beyonce and Federer and Oprah and Phil Knight. Every one of us has that capability in our brain to build genius. So what I'm suggesting is anyone who wants to get up early so they get an extra hour and they can do the things that we're talking about, practice it for 66 days until you will reach what researchers call a state of automaticity, where it actually gets easier to get up at 5 a.m. than not to get up at 5 a.m. And so in the book, one of the brain tattoos is all change is hard at first and it's messy in the middle and it's gorgeous at the end.
Yes.
And everything, Marie, that we once found difficult, that we now find easy, we once found difficult. We do have the ability to wire in new habits, and joining the 5 a.m. club is simply the best habit anyone can wire in to lead to an upward spiral of success for greater productivity, better health, more peace of mind, more happiness, and living a much more high-impact life.
Rule number 4, be generous.
Jim Carrey said, "I wish everyone could be rich and famous to realize there's no joy in that," to paraphrase his words.
Yes.
And, I've seen the best and the best. I've had Richard Branson on my faculty, Steve Wozniak, Shaquille O'Neal. I've worked with real superstars. And a lot of them are just really unhappy people. I'm not saying the ones I mentioned, but a lot of them are really unhappy people. And they'll show you their smiley face, but deep inside they're going, I'm worth, $3 billion and I've got jets and I've got multiple residences, but there's got to be more. And so how I would urge people to embrace the message of being a forceful servant for people is, first of all, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot of entrepreneurs who follow you, there's no better way than standing for generosity if you want to own your domain. What made Apple, first $1 trillion company, was Steve Jobs wasn't worried about the cash, he was worried about the craft. Someone came to one of my events and said, Robin, you mentioned Steve Jobs. I saw him 6 weeks before he died. I went into his den as he was dying. And he said, I think it was just before the release of the iPhone. And it was like, that little thing we were working on? He had a monomaniacal obsession bordering on a possession to birth beauty into the world that would elevate the lives of his customers. That's generosity, not scarcity. So it's great for business. Secondly, if you want real joy, it doesn't come from getting. And a lot of the book is about how you materialize empires in the world. But the end of the book, when Mr. Riley, the billionaire, we can talk about the story, he's on that Franschhoek vineyard and he shares his 11 letters. And he explains, he uses a word called the magic. And if you want to inhabit the magic, I've done it at parts of my life. I don't know if you have, but I've experienced bliss. And then it comes and it goes. But bliss has never come to me from getting. Bliss and joy, and what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who coined the term flow from University of Chicago, when we are literally in that moment, when we're in our magic, that comes from giving. It comes from being in the moment when you're writing that book going, how can I be an instrument of service and bring on my craft? Giving, like helping someone on the street, doing something for your family. I'm really into philanthropy these days. That's my joy. So that's how I would urge people. Like if you want real empires, if you want real happiness, you want real bliss, you want to elevate your immune system, look, there's lots of science. Just go out in the world and give as much value as you possible and radiate possibility, and amazing things will unfold in your life.
Also, if you want to have more confidence, self-love, self-belief, check out my 254 series. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a habit. So I've designed a special free program to help you get it, where I will send you an unlisted video to your email for the next 254 days to shift your self-belief forward. The link to sign up for free is in the description below.
One of the real reasons we don't do the things that frighten us is because we are afraid of being judged. And so to become fearless, why not find some time every day to practice becoming fearless? Stop resisting. I encourage you, stop resisting the natural flow of epic performance. Stop resisting the natural seasons of life.
Rule number 5, live by your drum beat.
Once you understand that life is short, once you understand that living your life to please other people while betraying your own ethical ambitions is a waste of time. And once you remember that tomorrow could be the end, hopefully it won't be, and I'm sure it won't be, but no one knows when we check out. No one knows when our last day will be. And it is a false assumption that we will all get to live into our 90s. And once you really build intimacy, like emotional intimacy, not only intellectual, emotional intimacy with the fact that this could be one of your final days, then it's not a depressing thing. It becomes an inspirational thing. You start to live by your own drum beat. You start to listen to your own authentic voice. You start to be braver. You start to be more loving. You start to be more kinder. You start to do bolder things. You start to seize opportunities because you're not in limbic hijack over failing, which is one of the big reasons why we don't take great steps.
Rule number 6, get things done.
Getting big things done. You mentioned it in the introduction. It's like ferocious, like a warrior when it comes to execution. Like great leadership is less talk and more do. It doesn't really matter what the chatter. I mean, it's all about execution, implementation, and application. So they get things done. And we live in a world where, we pull out the phone, people, I'm going to get this done and I'm going to get that done. We say to people, I'll send you a book. It doesn't get done. Even worse, we lose self-respect from the promises we make to ourselves that we break. That's where it all starts. Like, it's so, this, it's so important. Your income, your impact, your relationship with creativity, productivity, and the world, it all comes down to your relationship with yourself.
Rule number 7, stretch yourself.
I think a bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul. And, you were talking about people who say, well, maybe I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. It's not for me. And here's why I can't do it. And one thing I've realized is we become victims when we recite our excuses, and we recite them so many times, we actually believe they are true. And I think you can cling to your excuses, or you can go out there and have an impact and live a fulfilling life and be highly creative and enjoy the magic life, but you don't get to do both. And so you're right. No one's saying, burn yourself out and hurt yourself or anything like that. I think there's a whole chapter in the 5 a.m. Club on the essentialness of rest. I believe that elite performance without deep recovery leads to depletion of all your assets of genius. So I think it's self-awareness to know when should you rest, when should you pull back, when should you give up from a project, or when you should just continue past your limits so you can find new horizons. And that's about getting to know yourself. But I think growth comes from stretching ourselves.
Rule number 8, let go.
One of the greatest of all spiritual pursuits is learning how to let go, learning how to let go of people who hurt you, learning how to let go of events that have disappointed you. It is not until you really get good at letting go that you can advance into your bullish and brighter future. And how do you let go? Well, you can journal about it. You can make a conscious intention to just let go. Or maybe you let go by philosophical understanding that the people who might have hurt you were doing the best that they could do based on where they are at in their evolution. And that people who are hurting hurt other people. Or maybe you can let go by prayer or auto-suggestion or meditation or visualization.
So the first philosophical point is let go.
Rule number 9, channel your intentions.
There's a lot of emerging science saying, here's the reality, and anyone who wants to dismiss it is denying science, which is planet Earth is a tiny planet in a galaxy of trillions of planets. My friend Deepak Chopra was on my stage at one of my events a few months ago. He's a lovely man. He just radiates goodness. And he took us on a tour de force about cosmology, and he's been a pioneer for so many years. And he confirmed the science, which is we are all part of an energy source, whatever you want to call it, God, nature, life. And you're absolutely right, Jay. Your intentions are creative. So we could come at it from a cosmological point of view. When you say, here's who I want to be. You know, this morning in my journaling, I'm going to meet Jay. I'm so delighted and blessed that he's invited me on his show because he influences so many people. How may I serve? That intention, hopefully, is creative. So we're very powerful. I'll come at it another way, which is epigenetics. Epigenetics, as you know, stands for the emerging field of science, which is you are not your genome. The old school said, your DNA, what you get from mom and dad, that's your destiny. We're now realizing that epigenetics means our environment, our daily rituals, like getting up at 5 a.m., our thoughts, what we eat, our peer group, etc., literally affects the upregulation or downregulation of our genome. What does that mean? It means if you believe in yourself, if you do the work in the journaling, if you get up at 5 a.m. and do that victory hour and go through the 20-20-20 formula, you literally are recalibrating who you will become out in the world. So you're absolutely right. Then you start channeling your intentions and you start stepping into your power. Like, we are awesomely powerful beings. Most of us have blocked our intimacy with our true power.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is be crazy.
Be crazy. The great leaders are insane. And I say that they're insane to the majority. The great ones are all misfits, and they're all weird. I mean, the very nature of being a disruptor and a leader means you're not a follower. And if you're not a follower, then you're not buying the Kool-Aid that society sells you. If you're not a follower, you're not like this all the time looking for likes. If you're not a follower, you dress the way you want to dress. If people criticize you, yeah, they criticize all the great ones. You know, critics are nothing more than dreamers who got scared and never got off their chairs and got back in the game. So you've got to be willing to 5 a.m. Weird. Who does that? Why not sleep? Leaders have to be willing not to be followers.
Now I've got a special bonus clip that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video, and what is your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of actually doing something and following through. That, Believe Nation, is not enough. 35% is not enough. We gotta do something. But when you get inspired by watching a video like this, and then you create a plan of action, your chances of following through jump to 91%. And when you commit publicly, like putting your comment down below with your plan, it jumps to 95%. That's what I want for you. I want you to take action. Your dreams are too important. Your life matters. Your mission has to happen. So, question of the day, your biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week, put it down in the comments below, and I'm gonna celebrate alongside with you.
Soul set is nothing mystical and it's nothing religious. Soul set is about saying, I'm going to turn down the voice of my ego through my deep inner work so that the primal hero and highest part of me runs my life. Soul set is about saying, life is short. Before I know it, no matter how long I live, I'm going to be dust. How can I serve as many people as possible? Soul set is about finding a cause that is bigger than your life that you're going to donate the rest of your life to. I suggest to you, when you calibrate your soul set, you become a force of nature on the planet that becomes undefeatable, and yet people don't really focus on soul set. For the past number of years, I've been reading obituaries. And you might say, Robin, that's negative, and I don't think it's negative, I think it's really positive. Because I think few things are as powerful to wake you up, to remind you about what's most important, to fuel your energy, to get you into the game so you let go of your fears and you do what you need to do to get big things done than connecting to your own mortality. When you realize that every single day could be your last, or when you appreciate that no matter how long you live, life is a short ride, you just sort of let go of the fears and you let go of the limits and you live full on and you seize opportunities and you have real conversations with real people and you sort of wear your heart on your sleeve and you bring on the fullness of your authenticity and you do whatever it takes to get your loftiest dreams to get done. And so I read these obituaries and it reminds me about what life is all about. And relatively recently, I've started walking in cemeteries. I was in Mauritius a little while ago. It's, I don't know if you've been to Mauritius, but it's this paradise on earth. It's this tiny island about 4 hours off the coast of Cape Town. And I've been to Mauritius a number of times. I was there to give a big leadership event. You know, I talk about leading without a title. So it was filled with iconic CEOs and people running big industries and big companies and entrepreneurs and startup people. And it was really wonderful. But I also took about a week and a half just to refuel and to work on my new book and to reconnect with my values and to set myself up for the coming months. And one of the things I did was I went for a long walk. I love walking. I find interesting, like I find a lot of the most creative people, the most productive people in the planet, they all have one thing in common. They have the routine of walking on a regular basis. And so I love walking. I've walked in nature for many, many years. And so here I am in Mauritius and I just started walking. And I was actually listening to an interview of Charlie Rose and Steve Martin. And it was done in New York in front of an audience of a few thousand people. And it was about an hour and a half long. And Steve Martin was talking about his career, and Charlie Rose is one of the great interviewers of our time. So he was asking about how he became so good at what he did and his life and his love of art and stand-up comedy and acting. I mean, Steve Martin became an actor after a stand-up comedian, etc. And so I'm walking and the sun is setting and I'm walking along the Indian Ocean and I'm looking at the flowers. And I get to this little village, and it's this really, this little village with a lot of character. And as I'm walking along the edge of the village, still close to the seaside, I spot a cemetery. And I've learned to follow my instinct more than ever before, because instinct is more powerful than reason. And life will lead you to an interesting place if you stay with the flow. And so I walked towards this cemetery, and I walked into the cemetery. And I started walking through the cemetery very respectfully and carefully. But it was interesting to me because a lot of the tombstones were just made out of wood. And somewhat sadly, some of the wooden crosses were actually really, really small. And you could tell that the grave sites were of kids. And as I walked through the cemetery, I saw these crosses and I saw some tombstones. Some looked very old. A few graves looked fresh. And it reminded me really about the shortness of life. I mean, Marcus Aurelius has written one of my favorite books, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And actually, he didn't write it. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor. And during a long military campaign, in his journal, he wrote his thoughts and his philosophies. And someone found those diaries, those journals, and made them into this book called The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And he does talk about the shortness of life. And so does, Epictetus and a lot of the great Stoic philosophers. And being in this cemetery and walking through it with great delicacy, it reminded me how short life is. And it reminded me we all have hopes and dreams, and we never know when those dreams are going to get dashed. And we never know when our last day will unfold. Some people will wake up tomorrow morning, they'll get in their car, You know, they'll take a shower, they'll have their coffee, they'll say goodbye to their loved ones, and that will be the last day that their loved ones will ever see them. You know, some people on the planet the day after tomorrow will go into their doctor's office to get the result of a routine checkup, and the doctor will say, sit down, I've got some sad news for you. And they'll be diagnosed with maybe some kind of a terminal illness. I mean, accidents, illness, tragedy, catastrophe is also a reality of humanity. And so what I'm suggesting to you is do whatever it takes to be in the moment and to stay positive and to stay on your game and to optimize your craft and to spend time with your loved ones and to take care of your fitness and to learn something new every day and to enjoy the beauty of sunsets and star-filled nights, and at the same time, as much as possible, please do not lose perspective. Stay connected to your mortality. You know, Steve Jobs in that famous Stanford speech said it really well. You know, you are naked. You have nothing to lose. And he learned that when he connected to his cancer. And so maybe you will install a ritual once a month. On the way home from work, you will pull over to a cemetery and you'll spend 5 minutes even in meditation, looking at the tombstones, looking at the crosses, studying the graves, or whatever your tradition is in whatever nation you're from, because not every tradition I know has the grave site. Sometimes it's the funeral pyre, which really reminds me that life is really short and you never know when your last day is going to be. And so just build some kind of a routine to remind you on the shortness of life, so that you tell the people you love how you feel about them. So you write the letters that need to be written. And I know people don't write letters, but writing a letter to someone you need to express forgiveness to or gratitude to is really powerful. Pursue the projects that will allow you to be the legend of your industry. Chase the passions that fuel your joy and live every day as if it was your last, because we never know when our last day will show up. I run what I call the 20-20-20 formula. I shared it with you, and you know, many people around the world have found great value from it. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it sort of rolls back to what the Spartan warriors once said. And they said that the person who sweats more in training bleeds less in war. Right. And whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an artist, whether you're a baker, whether you're a yoga teacher, whether you're a mom, whether you're a street sweeper, you know, when you walk out in the world, there's a call on your life to bring your best game to the world and release as much talent as possible. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, what they do is they get up every morning and they sort of run their day by default. Right. And they're chasing the day and they let life act on them in a very reactive way. And so I think what we want to do is see ourselves as warriors of some sort, where we take from 5 to 6 every morning and we prepare ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so to give a tactic to your many listeners, it's the 20-20-20 formula. First 20 minutes as soon as you get up, 5 to 5:20, intense exercise. And that's going to do a whole bunch of things. You know, a lot of my work is very science-based. And it's going to create a pharmacy of mastery. So you're going to release dopamine, which is the motivational neurotransmitter. You're going to reduce cortisol in your brain, which is the fear chemical. You're going to release serotonin, which even if you're cranky, you start to feel good. You're going to release BDNF, which scientists are calling miracle grow for the brain, which actually allows your brain cells to repair from stress. I mean, this is exciting to me.
Yeah, it is.
Right, so that first 20 minutes, you rewire your brain. What else do you do? You jumpstart your metabolic rate. What else do? You prepare yourself for resilience against stress, and it just goes on and on. Second part of the 20-20-20 formula, you plan. You pull out a journal. You can do an imprint of your day, which is very powerful, or you can look at your big 5 or your plan. That releases hope. It releases focus, right? Because an addiction to distraction is the death of creative production.
Totally.
Okay? And then the final part of the 20-20 formula, learning. I mean, he or she who learns the most wins. What made Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk is they know more than anyone around them. And so I believe that, the more you know, the more you can achieve. And there's great value investing as much money as you have into audiobooks or programs like you do at the Genius, the 25K conference and the Genius Network, or whatever it is. But, every quarter I make sure I get out of my office and I go off to a conference. I invest a lot of money in learning and training and coaching, and that's the 20-20-20 formula. You can be a history maker, or you can be liked by everyone around you. You can't be both. I mean, the very nature of living your personal greatness and doing something otherworldly in our world of ours means you're going to have to think differently from the majority. You're going to have to install the habits and routines that most people don't do. You're going to have to live, talk, breathe, walk, work, produce, create in a way that most people who are card-carrying members of the cult of mediocrity just don't buy into. I mean, you look at most people out on the world today, and this is not judging, this is just reporting, but they're addicted to entertainment, they love gossiping, they're negative, they're toxic. Anyone who wants to do anything great, they want to bring them down, they dismiss the game changers, and they're just coasting through life. And so the very nature of you stepping up your game, living your greatest potential, owning your craft, dominating your field, and living a life that's legendary means you're going to have to leave the 5% and make a decision to live as very few people do. And what does that mean? It means you're going to be laughed at. It means you're going to be ridiculed. It means you're going to be misunderstood because leadership is a lonely sport, and it means you just might be hated. And so there is great value when people start to hate you. Because if you look at Jay-Z, I was reading his biography, and he said, I really knew that I was having influence in the popular culture when people started hating me. If you look at a lot of the great authors, when their books go to #1 globally, a lot of the amateurs actually start to say, oh, that's garbage, I could put them down. I watched a documentary last night on Steve Aoki, the famous EDM, electric dance music DJ who's getting so much traction in the world right now. And he was talking about some of the comments that he sees in the social media. And it was things like garbage and, boring and amateurish music and whatever. Even though he's so skilled. You just watch the documentary called I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. And you just see the skill. And you can just look at any great athlete, and you can look at any great scientist, you can look at any great chef, you can look at any great artist, you can look at any great author, you can look at any great statesman, you can look at any world-class stateswoman. Anyone who has done something at an exceptional level breeds cynics and dismissers. So, the point is simply this: the very nature of doing something that very few people are willing to do means that the majority will laugh at you. Why? Because deep inside, they know they have the opportunity to do something great too. And your example makes them feel guilty. And all I'm suggesting to you with great love and respect is simply this: you do have a choice. You can listen to your haters, you can be one of the haters, you can join the victim herd, you can dismiss people who are doing great things, or you can reach into yourself and ask yourself this fundamental question: what do I want to stand for the rest of my life? Do I really want to rise to mastery? Do I want to get to the last hour of my last day and know that I took every ounce of the human potential I was blessed with, and through easy times and difficult times, I brought it on. And as a result of my values, my mindsets, my heart set, my habits, my routines, my disciplines, I owned my game, and I modeled possibility, and I served lots of people, and I built a great lifestyle. And now it's the last hour of my last day, and I'm surrounded by my loved ones. And even though people threw stones at me, I took those stones, and rather than being knocked down, I constructed a monument of mastery that stands as my legacy. And if you live like that, you'll be one of the great ones. which is my greatest wish for you. You may have read my book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Sometimes I speak about Ferraris because I don't have a Ferrari, but I love the way that Ferrari rolls. And here's what I mean by that. A Ferrari is in many ways mobile art on 4 tires. A Ferrari in so many ways is a distillation of Enzo Ferrari's philosophy on mastery. A Ferrari in so many ways is a reminder to you and me about what world class stands for. And what I want to really dial into today is this. Did you know that every year Ferrari only produces 7,000 Ferraris? And the point of wisdom or the powerful idea I want you to really think about and deconstruct in your journal tonight after this mastery session is, why go really wide when you can be singularly deep? I'm going to repeat that again. But a great company and a great performer goes really, really deep on 1 or 2 things, and that's how you rise to iconic. We live in a world, I call it the cult of superficiality, addicted to distraction, afflicted by interruption. So we take the trinity of our performance assets, our mental focus, our physical energy, and our willpower. Those are the 3 primary assets of a world-class producer. And we diffuse them, we disperse them around thousands of projects, lots of little things. And yet I think of the 7,000 Ferrari philosophy. You know, they are world-class in terms of producing iconic automobiles, vehicles, but they don't want to be, they don't appeal to everyone. They don't produce hundreds of thousands of vehicles. They want to do a few products. They want to bring out a few things, but do them really, really well. And that's really the craftsman's mindset. That's how craftsmen think, or craftswomen. It's do a few things, but do them really, really well. You are an artist. My invitation to you is to produce poetry in terms of your work that the world reveals as mastery. You know, and that is really all about bringing rigor to your game. It's not about doing a lot of things, it's about doing one thing well. Because the secret of genius is not complexity, the secret of genius is simplicity. You look at any genius entrepreneur, you look at any genius producer, you look at any genius athlete, they're not doing 5 sports, they're doing 1 sport incredibly well, and then putting in the training time to be monomaniacally focused so that they become otherworldly brilliant at their one thing. And I guess what I'm suggesting to you ultimately is this. Think about the 7,000 Ferraris philosophy. And if you are a business builder, let's say you're a startup entrepreneur, let's say you're a Fortune 500 manager, let's say you're a professional athlete, because a lot of professional athletes are watching these mastery sessions. Let's say you are a mother or father, a yoga teacher, or a chef. What are the few things that you could actually do in your work so that you take all of your mental focus, your physical energy, and the willpower that you wake up with every single morning, and you really monomaniacally focus those trinity of performance assets on the few things, the few projects that, when consistently iterated and improved every day over time, will allow you to reach a place where the world calls you world class. And if you can not only get this idea on the 7,000 Ferraris philosophy, but apply it so it becomes a way of being, you really will own your game. Nothing fails like success. You're successful, maybe it's in your health, maybe it's in your finances, maybe it's in your career, maybe it's in your family life, maybe it's in the way that you show up in the world. Awesome. You're in a really vulnerable place right now. It is one thing to be successful. It is another thing to sustain success over the coming decades. Is that not a powerful idea? I mean, let's go to the entertainment industry. It's very hard to be a one-hit wonder. Let's not knock a one-hit wonder. But it's even harder to become an iconic rock band or hip-hop band. Let's go to the arts. It is very hard to come up with your Sistine Chapel. Got it. It is even harder to become a Michelangelo. So are you playing the short game or are you playing the long game? This is rule number 2, or lesson number 2 that life has taught me. Play the long game Aim for legendary. Don't just say, I want to be world class in my dominant pursuit for a little window of time. Say, I want to have the guts and the grit and the acumen and the mindset and the capability and the commitment to create enduring success. And that's why I say nothing fails like success. You look at the restaurant that is hot in your neighborhood right now. They're on the path to obsolescence if they're not really careful. Sure, they went from a little neighborhood shop that made beautiful pasta, that had great service, that had the owner on the floor, shaking your hand, getting to know your name. Then they got written up in the magazines, and then they got interviewed, and then word of mouth spread like wildfire. And what happened? They became arrogant. You see, success can be so toxic. And it happens, it is such a pull on every human being. It just plays with your mind. And you literally shift from humility to arrogance. You shift from humility to arrogance. And once the arrogance sets in a mindset, it starts to populate every other person on the team, every other person in the culture, every other person in the community. And it is a very short fall from success to irrelevance. So lesson number 2 is nothing fails like success. As you become more successful, become more humble. As you become more successful, work even harder. As you become more successful, care even more about your product. As you become more successful, learn even more. I invite you, when you are the titan of your industry, be sitting in the room with 18-year-olds beginning their game. When you are the icon of your field, be the person who is up, not at 5 o'clock anymore, let's play at 4 o'clock, reading, listening to the podcast, writing in your journals, setting your goals, focusing on your intentions. As you become more successful, be more humble. As you become more successful, be even more punctual. As you become more successful, become even more passionate. As you become older, become even younger. Yesterday, I was walking on the street and I met this man in his 80s. He said, Robin, I finally retired. He's probably close to 90. And he is a legendary clothier in the country that I live in. And he just retired. And he started his shop, which is now an empire, in 1954. So I don't know what that is, but that is decades and decades and decades and decades. And he did not want to retire. He just retired, but he is still on fire to do amazing things. Age is just a number. Do not let an old person into your body. Nothing fails like success. It goes back to my dad, and he was very much about humility. I mean, he's 77 right now, and he gets up every morning and he goes off to his medical practice, and he still sees patients all day. And he said, I said, Dad, why are you still doing that at 77? He said, because my patients need me. Wow. And so I think, one of the core values he was so brilliant in sharing with me is to be an instrument of service. And I think the moment your ego runs your brain and the ego runs your business and the ego runs your way of being, then your gifts and your talents and your focus and your capabilities are off the creativity and the talents and the service that will make you great in the world. And I think it gets to a very philosophical point, if I may. I think it's relevant to any leader, any entrepreneur, any business builder, any game changer. But there is such an addiction to the shiny toys that the ego sells us. Okay? Yes. Yeah. And society and the matrix and our peers and the world says, if you get a Ferrari, if you sell 10 million books, if you have lots of money in the bank, if you have, the beautiful partner in the big house, then you're going to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and you are going to feel full of joy and peace and feel you're fully alive. And, I've had most of those in my life at a pretty exponential level. I've been very blessed. And not one of those things has provided me with enduring, sustainable happiness and fulfillment. Yeah. And the things that provide me with just deep happiness and deep fulfillment and energize me all come from a position of inner power. And so, at the events you're talking about, I don't derive much power from all the books I've sold or bestseller. I don't care about that stuff. I really don't. I care less about that than ever before. At the end of the day, we are a bunch of people on a little planet in a huge galaxy, and before you know it, we're going to be a bunch of dust. And the great billionaires get buried next to the taxi drivers and the pizza makers, and we are not that big a deal. And I think all that really matters is while we are alive, do your best to use every day as a vehicle to birth your talents into the world. And secondly, if you do that, you're going to serve the world and raise the world with you. And that all just comes from inner power. I mean, that's just deriving your power from a place within, and that's where you get grace, and that's where you get great creativity. That's where you get boundless energy, because it's not about addicted to what the world thinks of you. I was in Johannesburg a little while ago, and I went through the airport. And I went into the men's room or washroom or bathroom, however you want to call it. And so I walked in to the men's room, and the first thing I hear is, "Welcome to my office." And this was the janitor at the Johannesburg men's room.
That's funny.
Who janitorized, or I'll make up a word, cleaned the toilets like Mozart composed music. Now that man has no money. That man probably has very little education. That man is judged by the world as having an unimportant job.
Right.
And that man is a hero, could be a hero to millions of people. Why? Because he actually saw himself as an ambassador to South Africa. And his passion was palpable. And his visceral commitment to doing work at the highest level was like you don't see even from the CEOs.
Right.
And all I'm saying is, even the person with the broken heart, the person who's down on their knees, whether they see it or not, they have a choice to rise above their circumstances. And leadership and humanity is a testament to the people who have done it. I mean, you you look at Mandela, 27 years in imprisonment. When his son died, he wasn't allowed to attend the funeral of his own son. He said that was one of the great pains of his life. And what did he do? The victim looks at something like that, torture, and says, "I am broken." And they give up, and they close their heart, they close their mind, they close their creativity, and they blame the rest of their life on what happened to them. But Mandela, what he chose to do was to use it as an opportunity, because actually, the things that break your heart, if you choose, can open your heart. Fear, the world says fear is bad. Fear is only an opportunity for bravery training. And what he did was he used those 27 years of torture to open himself mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, to the point where when he was released and became the president of South Africa, he invited his jailers to sit in the front row at his inauguration. And he was asked why, and he said, "Because if I don't, I'd still be in prison." Right. And that's a long way of saying, but we do make excuses because we are very good at self-deception. Because if we actually had to face the responsibility of playing with our bigness in the world, we'd have to let go of our addiction to our excuses and leave what's safe. Am I making sense?
No, totally. No, you're totally making sense.
You'd have to leave what's safe. I mean, we are addicted to crisis sometimes. It makes no sense. We are addicted to pain. And we'd have to actually leave the pain to go out to the possibility of pleasure and joy and greatness. And believe it or not, that frightens us.
Right.
So we make these excuses, and then we blame people. "Oh, Joe or Robin, I don't like the way he looks. He speaks differently." But subconsciously, as you're suggesting, those are just our protective mechanisms to avoid owning the responsibility of our brilliance. The traits that make you strange are the gifts that make you special. And so I know you're different, because you wouldn't be here with me now if you didn't feel you're different. You probably don't fit in with most conversations. I sure don't fit in with most conversations. I don't know a lot about most things that most people talk about, because I don't participate in the majority. Right? I don't participate in the news. I don't like to gossip. I like to encourage people versus diminish people. I like to be productive versus busy. I like to be creative versus complacent. I like to create value versus take from other people. I like to move into my present and future versus get stuck in the past. I like to be fast versus move too slow. I like to be a leader versus a victim. I like to believe in possibility versus get stuck in rational thinking, because the instinct is so much more powerful than intellect. And all I'm suggesting to you is simply this. It's the very things that make you different that make you authentic. And if you don't fit in, I just want to share with you, I've never fit in. And the very nature of anyone who's living a visionary life, and you are living a visionary life, no matter what you're doing, let's not get trapped in labels. Oh, I'm just a coder. I'm just a receptionist at a restaurant or in an organization. I'm just a yoga teacher. I'm just a gym manager. I'm just a chef in a restaurant. I'm just a teacher. People always say this when I interact with them on the social media. I'm just an entrepreneur. I'm just a student. No, you're not. I'm just a mom. I'm just a dad. No, you're not just. You're very special. There are no extra people on the planet today. And I just want to say to you and validate for you and encourage you, those things that other people might not get, those are your gifts. You might be awkward. Awesome. You see the world through a different lens. Steve Wozniak, who was on my stage at the Titan Summit Zurich, the co-founder of Apple, one of the best people I've ever met. He would not have been able to create the Apple platforms and products that he created if he didn't see the world through a different set of eyes. Steve Jobs saw the world through a different set of eyes. Travis Kalanick of Uber saw the world through a different set of eyes. Jeff Bezos of Amazon saw possibility. Let me have an online store that initially sells books. John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, Rosa Parks, Jean-Michel Basquiat, Beethoven, Michelangelo, who did the Sistine Chapel, and in Florence, David, Jonas Salk, Tesla. We could just go on and on and on and on. These people were misunderstood because the nature of a genius is to not fit in. One of my brain tattoos that I've become very well known for is, no one will believe in you until you believe in you. And so, good people often become seduced by the chatter of their loudest fears. And what I mean by that is we come up with a great idea. Let's say it's to start a project that will allow you to lead your field. Let's say it's an idea for a new product that will allow you to grow a new company. Let's say you come up with an idea for a new painting if you are an artist. Let's say it's an idea that will allow you to take your fitness and your wellness and your longevity to a whole new level of wow. And pretty shortly after you come up with the idea, your ego starts screaming. Because we are good in our comfort zones, but the moment we start to go blue ocean around our next level of mastery, our fears come up because we're going out into the unknown. It's human. You know, if you were to look at the psychobiology of it and you were to study the pure biology of it, there's a term called homeostasis. Human beings are hardwired for a steady state. And that kept us alive. So literally our heart beats around the same amount, the 72 beats per minute, and our blood pressure is within a small bandwidth, and that allows us to survive. But what happens is when we come up with a new idea and when we see a new opportunity and we start to leave our comfort zones into the zone of the unknown where greatness lives, we get scared. And the true heroes and the true titans and the true masters, those people are not fearless. Those are people who have just practiced walking into their fear and living on the razor's edge consistently to the point where they're comfortable amid their discomfort. And that's the great opportunity for you, not to avoid fear, but to be comfortable in the unknown, to be comfortable when you're terrified. And that really is what the great artists, the great entrepreneurs, the great titans, and the great masters are very good on doing. So the first reason good people lose is their faith is not as strong as their fear. Or to put it a bit more elegantly, their fears are larger than their faith. And so to be tactical for you, how do you build more faith? Well, you do what you're frightened to do. And it's a practice. A great athlete practices every morning. And a great producer practices walking into their fears every single day. And what I'm encouraging you to do is every single day do one thing that causes your palms to sweat. Every single day start training your brain to hunt for opportunities to step into that unknown where possibility lives. And if you keep on doing it, you're literally going to build some new neurological hardwiring, a new pathway in your brain where it becomes easier. Because as you know so well, all change is hard at first and it's messy in the middle and it's beautiful at the end. I remember being in Soho, New York, and I walked into one of the stores and I bought a coat. And I was leaving on an airplane for home later that day, and I asked the person who was taking care of me, I said, is it possible, and that's a great respectful way to ask for something, is it possible to get this coat hemmed and adjusted a little bit for me? And I said, the thing is that I'm leaving later today. And he looked at me, and I've never forgotten it, because we all have these people in our lives who say one thing or show up in a certain way, and they stay with us for the rest of our lives. And he said to me these words. He said, I'd love to do that for you. I'd love to do that for you. And again, the whole brain tattoo I'm trying to deconstruct here is make your I can larger than your IQ. You know, I remember being in Prague, and I asked someone on the other, again, I spent a lot of time in hotels, and I said, is it possible to do this? And here was the reply on the other end of the phone. I think it was someone from the front desk, or maybe it was room service. And I try to eat as clean as possible. So probably it was a request, could I have olive oil and fresh lemon or lemon as the salad dressing? And here's the reply. Just to really lovingly and respectfully and hopefully fluently and elegantly bring this leadership insight home to you. I said, is this possible? And his reply was, anything is possible. So it's really easy to get seduced and stuck into a mindset of can't. You know, someone says, let's start a new business. Someone says, here's a great poetic project that if we release it to the world will help us own our marketplace. And it sounds very obvious again, but ask yourself this, is your default reply a symptom of a mindset of can't, or do you have a mentality of possibility? When someone says, here, read this book, do you shift into can't or can? When someone says, hey, you know what? I'm amped to run a marathon. Do you go, I can't? Is that your default setting in your neurobiological hardwiring? Or do you go, absolutely, or I'd love to do this? You know, it's really, really important, and that is one of the core distinctions of leadership, isn't it? For the next 90 days, your first 90 minutes at work, make it focused on your single most important project. I'll repeat that again. For the next 90 days, the first 90 minutes of your workday, focus monomaniacally on your single most valuable project. I call it your game-changing move. So it might be creating a new piece of code that will revolutionize the marketplace. It might be a new product that when you launch it will fill a need within your industry that no peer is currently providing. I don't know what your game-changing move is, but this is your poetry. This is your magnum opus for the next 90 days. So what most people do is, people who are playing at victimhood, people who are in the 95%, people who are making excuses about ordinary results in their life, a lot of them are not doing the things that would give them legendary results. And what they do is they get to the office, and rather than using prime time for A activities, they use their best hours watching dancing cats on whatever it is, whatever the video platform is. They spend their best hours surfing the internet, looking at blogs. They spend their best hours playing with notifications, reading notifications, chatting with friends who are not really their friends, but really they're just bored, so they're distracting themselves, which is just a form of medication, because potential unexpressed turns to pain, and they're in a lot of pain, and it's subconscious, and they haven't done the work to know it. So really, they've created these drugs of choice, like too much email, too much web surfing, too much chit-chatting, too much looking at funny looking videos that make them laugh in the moment, that make them feel happy and give them a short burst of dopamine and maybe a little bit of serotonin, which is the pleasure neurotransmitter, and that's how they get through their day. And all I'm saying is there is so much distraction available to you out there that if you are not acutely careful, it will dominate your days. What I'm really trying to say is this: a ritual for you to run and dial in and hardwire to the point of automaticity, that's the word the researchers use when a habit becomes your new normal, over 66 days, is the 90-91 rule. And to give it to you again so you really remember it, for the next 90 days, your first 90 minutes, create a tight bubble of total focus so that no one can distract you. Turn off your devices, put them in a little plastic bag, put some reminders on your door, maybe some Post-it notes that this is my tight bubble of total focus for the next 90 minutes. Tell your team, tell your loved ones, maybe put a do not disturb sign on your door. They'll laugh, and explain it to them that for the next 90 days, I will spend 90 minutes away from distraction, away from technology, away from interruptions, focusing on my magnum opus, focusing on the genius project that I want to bring into the world, because I will never mail it in. I will always bring it on, and I'm going to do this for the next 90 minutes, and I'm going to optimize it and iterate it every day, and I'm going to bring my full bandwidth, because what makes a genius, they all have one trait in common: they were able to spend extended periods of time in isolation, focused monomaniacally on their most valuable project. Clarity is the DNA of mastery. So if you look at the titans of business, the true leaders in finance, these people literally will say, look at my charts. If you look at a great military leader, you look at a great athlete, they have such granular, in a world of superficiality, they have shifted to massive granularity so they know in intimate detail exactly what their future timeline will look like. Why? Because clarity breeds and builds and is the DNA of mastery. You want to have a very clear vision of what your future is going to look like. And when you know in intimate detail what your future will look like, then you automatically, subconsciously as well as consciously, can say no to the important. So you say a giant yes to the few things that are most important. You've heard me share this before. Confucius said it so well. The person who chases two rabbits catches neither. And so what I'm encouraging you to do is this exercise before you go to sleep tonight. Let's make this very tactical. I call it the 100-year timeline. On a single page from where you now are, 100 years out into your ideal future. I want you every single milestone on a single line to say, here's where I now am. Here's what's going to happen next week, next month, next quarter, next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, 75 years, 1 year, 100 years, until you have a 100-year timeline. And on the other side of the piece of paper, with crayons, so you tap into your part of the brain responsible for creativity, your right brain. Okay, with crayons, draw out your ideal family life, draw 1 year away, draw out your business life 1 year away, draw out your adventure life 1 year out into the future, draw out your financial life, draw out your material life, literally on a page with crayons, so you're not thinking, because here's a needle-moving insight. World class comes from instinct versus intelligence. You get your best ideas when you get out of your thinking. And just to give you some neuroscience, the seat of reasoning is the prefrontal cortex, but there's a phenomenon I teach in my live events called transient hypofrontality. This is the secret of genius. Geniuses don't get their ideas for Uber, Amazon, the electric bulb, Tesla, Shakespeare, the polio vaccination, SpaceX. Great ideas don't come from the intellects. They don't come from the neocortex reasoning and thinking. All great heroes and great inventors and great creators dialed into something deeper. When you get out of your neocortex through solitude and my life structure that I teach called the tight bubble of total focus, and when you get away from distraction and you immerse yourself in deep creativity and creation, and you find your laboratory, or what I call your Menlo Park, like Edison had his Menlo Park, which was with the wilderness away from the world, what happens? The prefrontal cortex gets silent, and it's called transient, which means temporary, transient hypo, small frontality. The neocortex, the seat in your brain of thinking, actually shuts down for a short period of time. This is profound information and will confirm your brain is built for genius. But if you don't do the right things, you're not going to be able to allow the genius to see the light of day. You might have a great mindset, positive thinking, but if you have a heart set full of anger, if your emotional life is sad, if you're disappointed from the past, if you haven't done that, the sweat lodges and the journaling and the body work and the affirmations to really open up a heart set, then you can have the mindset of an Elon Musk. You can have the mindset of a Steve Jobs. You can have a mindset of a Kobe. But you're going to sabotage yourself from world class. And to me, this is the great myth of positive thinking. You see a lot of people, they read all the books, they're positive thinkers, they've got the vision boards, nothing changes. Why? Because subconsciously, there's this wounding and a lack of deservability, and it's unconscious. And so they haven't done the work, or you may have not done the work to make the wounds of undeservability and scarcity and the low self-worth. That's why positive thinking alone does not work. This is, to me, a revolutionary insight. And by the way, a lot of the people who teach positive thinking in the past are men. So it's very male mind. And a lot of the people who are pioneers of heart set are women. Heart, empathy, healing. And so self-mastery to me, and this is a pioneering model that I teach at Personal Mastery Academy, it's not just mindset. That's only 25% of self-mastery. And as you know, self-mastery is the DNA of outer mastery. You're never going to perform higher than what's going on within. Mindset is only 25%. Heart set, your emotional life, working from confidence and love and service, and that sense of internal freedom is only another 25%. So those two are only 50%. There's a third interior empire you want to get to world class, which is health set. Working on your energy, your nutrition, your daily exercise, hacking your longevity, eating the right supplements, getting a massage every 2 weeks. You know, my 2 massage protocol, doing your 60-minute nature walk every week so that your health set is at world class. But that's only 75% of the equation towards self-mastery. You can have a great mindset, great heart set, great health set, but if you haven't worked on your soul set, turning down your ego. You know what disease and what energy depletion is caused by your ego beating you relentlessly about you not being enough and seeing your industry peers succeeding, and you feel insecure and irritated and angry and jealous? Well, where do you do that work? Within your soul set, the fourth interior empire. And as you do that, you turn down the ego and you open up your humanity and you open up your spiritual life and you become more soulful. And then you release work that is artistry versus just to win in the next few months. When you literally give your life over to a mighty mission that is larger than your ego, and you literally start to see your work as a ministry for the benefit of humanity. And if you're an artist or an entrepreneur or CEO, manager or coder, a doctor, a firefighter, but literally, if you saw your work as your poetry and your artistry, and you were on a mighty mission that was larger than even your ego and yourself, what would the caliber of your output be? Most leaders, most business people, most entrepreneurs, most human beings have never learned to be masterful communicators. And the very nature of influence and impact, which is the leader's job, is communication. I mean, in school, were you given a communication course? Very few people have been taught that. In your personal relationships, have you read books on communication? Well, that leads to, I mean, in an intimate relationship, or even just with a friend, it's the little miscommunications that over time stack into loss. In your intimate relationships, it's the little conversations that you could have had in 5 minutes if you had the tools to communicate and the awareness to speak. So literally, you could release the anger and build understanding and speak out your needs and feel the need to be heard. All those little things, if you had learned how to do that over and done it in 5 minutes with your intimate partner, you might not have lost the relationship. And in your professional life, learning to communicate inspires your teammates. You know, if you look at the great leaders of humanity, the Nelson Mandelas, the Mother Teresa's, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the John F. Kennedys, if you look at the great business builders, Steve Jobs, great example, right? He would be on the stage at the product launch and then that favorite line, one more thing. And that's when he would reveal the latest piece of technology that would create industry dominance when Steve Jobs was at Apple. Well, he was a masterful communicator, and Bud Tribble over at Apple called it his reality distortion field. Steve Jobs was a master salesman. He knew exactly what to say to get people to believe in the impossible, to allow their I can't to be less valuable than their I can't.
If you want another amazing video highlighting excellence in the Indian community, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.